It really is fun to read the Bible. I gave them an outline of the Bible in 50 words. This is the whole Bible in 50 words. God made, Adam bit, Noah arked, Adam split. Jacob fooled, Joseph ruled. Bush talked, Pharaoh plagued. Sea divided, tablets guided. Promise landed, judges led. Saul freaked, David peaked. Kingdom divided, prophets warned, people exiled, hope rose, Jesus born, God walked, anger crucified, love rose, spirit flamed, word spread, God remained.
Welcome, everyone, to podcast number 216, Renew Your Mind. With us today, we have Senior Pastor Paul Gruenberg. We have Pastor Jeremy Touroo. We have our Youth and Family Director and Praise Band Leader, Jordan Kettlewell. And we have a very special guest, Barb Jordan, that we'll learn more about her in a bit. And myself, Dana Hall, is the moderator. We're going to go into a series about the Bible. And I don't remember how I got to, somehow I heard about Barb Jordan, and I'll let her introduce herself in a minute here, but I heard about her doing a small group, and it was a short study for, I think it was 4 weeks.
As opposed to a tall study.
Yeah, as opposed to a tall or wide study. So anyway, I asked her about it, and when she started to tell me about it, I was myself personally totally enthralled in it because it serves so many purposes. So before we get into the details of that, I'll let Barb introduce herself. And then, Barb, if you can just tell us what the study was.
Okay. Well, my name is Barb Jordan, and I've been a member of this church for 6 years now. And I've been a Christian for 18 years. And
3 days.
And 3 days?
16 minutes. Yeah.
But who's counting? So, I've been sitting in small groups for quite a while now. And it occurred to me that there was a need. I noticed where people would get real nervous if they're asked to look up a verse or something, and they just don't know where to go. And, it's frustrating, and you can tell they're sweating it out, and it's like, this isn't good. People need to know where the things are. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then, we did a 1-year Bible study, and people were really daunted looking at that big fat book. And they're like, am I ever going to get through this? And people were really stressed out about it. And I thought, I think I could do a Bible study to let people know that the Bible isn't daunting at all. It can be a lot of fun, and there's a whole lot of ways to approach it. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to come up with a class, and I'm going to keep it real short because a lot of people can't devote, a half a year to a Bible study. So I figured I'm going to try to teach them whatever I can give them to help them find the Bible a little more
engaging.
Fun. Yeah. And it was all about fun. I wanted the class to be comfortable, no stress. We just wanted to have a good time while we were learning the Bible. And so that's how it started. And
that's what I liked about it, is the fact that you saw a need and people were stressed about reading the Bible. And to you, whenever I talk to you about reading the Bible, you use the word fun. And your face lights up and you're excited, and that's what drew me in, I guess.
I think that's something that is like, you hit the core of what is such a huge stumbling block for a lot of people. And I think everybody has probably fallen into this at some point or another, whether it's a Bible study or just daily devotions or whatever it might be, where it feels daunting, like it's homework. It's a task to complete. And when it becomes a task to complete, then we're just going through the motions, and we miss out on so much. We miss out on the fulfilling content and everything that God wants to tell us, and the fun.
And the fun.
Because there is some crazy, wild stuff going on in there. But when we see it as homework, I don't know about anybody else.
Or too difficult.
I wasn't a big fan of homework in school, and my grades reflected that. But when we see it as homework, it's
That's another
not,
podcast, right?
It's we miss so much. We miss so much. So I think you hit there on something that is a real stumbling block for everybody at some point.
Well, and I think a part of that is you're going to engage with God. And when we look at the Bible as a whole, we think there's just too much there. How am I going to ever synthesize or understand everything? But if you think in terms of God's going to speak to me in some form or fashion within the discussion, but specifically within the Bible. So, Dana, did you take the class?
I did not.
Okay,
but I want to.
So,
I
what was
plan
the
to
class?
do it again.
Good.
So what we did is the basic thing is I wanted to impart that it really is fun to read the Bible. You just gotta figure out what works for you. And so the very first class, the first thing I did is in everybody's little folder, I gave them an outline of the Bible in 50 words, just to show them how simple it is to get the Bible. And if you want, I'll read it.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be
It's
great.
only 50 words. So here it is. This is the whole Bible in 50 words. God made, Adam bit, Noah arked, Adam split. Jacob fooled, Joseph ruled. Bush talked, Pharaoh plagued. Sea divided, tablets guided. Promise landed, judges led. Saul freaked, David peaked. Kingdom divided, prophets warned, people exiled, hope rose, Jesus born, God walked, anger crucified, love rose, spirit flamed, word spread, God remained.
That is so
Amen.
beautiful.
Can I change some of those words?
Well, I didn't make this up. I found this somewhere and I've had it for years. And to me, that kind of is the Bible. It can
It's
be
really
simple.
good.
You just-
Yeah.
Did you get people to memorize it?
No, I don't think so. But they liked it, and again, this is a simple approach to the Bible. There it is.
Yeah.
In 50 words, there's everything you need to know about the Bible. So the next thing I said, look, I want to give you some guidelines to break the Bible down into like chunks that you can handle. So the first 5 books are what they call the books of Moses, right? Or the law,
The Pentateuch,
the
the Torah.
So, okay, and so that's going to talk about all the laws, all the rules. And then you move on to history. And there's 12 books of history.
Yeah.
And it goes from Joshua to Esther, and it tells a whole history of the Jews. And then you move on to the books of poetry.
Yeah.
Some people call them the books of wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom
So it's
literature.
Job through through Song of Solomon, right? So there's a chunk of 5. And then you have 5 major prophets.
Yeah.
And so that's Isaiah through Daniel. And then the rest are all the minor prophets. So you can break down that big, ugly 39 books into little chunks. That makes it just a little easier to get onto.
So is 5, 12, 5, 5,
12.
12. 5, 12, 5, 5, 12. Gosh, I'm going to have to write that one down too.
So as you were explaining this, chunking it down, what did you see on the faces of the people in your group?
Wonder, actually. I think people didn't know. They didn't know. And it was an easy way to remember
absolutely.
something important. Because you get in a Bible study and somebody always says, well, how many books are in the Bible? Well, this is a quick way for them to remember, and it's simple.
And
So
I
that
think
was the
it's
whole
all
goal.
making it more approachable.
Exactly.
When people can get a handle on some of these concepts and organize it in a certain way in their mind.
Yeah, the Bible shouldn't be so daunting.
No. And this is stuff kids would be able to use.
Oh, yeah.
Why not use the same stuff
I taught
with
kids
adults?
this, and this is why it works for adults.
We're just bigger kids.
Exactly. So, I gave him little snippets of things like that. One of my favorites is, the Bible can be taken apart in any way you want, any way you want. Find something you like and start there. You don't have to go from beginning to end.
Oh,
pick out
that
what
just
you
drives
like.
me crazy. I'm going to read the Bible this year, and I'm like, okay, so where are you starting? Well, I'm going to start at the very beginning. So I'm thinking, okay, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, they're going to stumble.
That's probably
They'll
where
about
you'll
start the-
Yeah, but if you don't know,
Three
then
weeks
of course
in
you're
and-
going to start from beginning to
Sure.
end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
I would
there's
say
other ways.
Start
Yeah.
with Mark. It's the shortest gospel, or John, a more spiritualized gospel. If they're Jewish, say, hey, Matthew.
Yeah. Well, I tell people, I said, okay, well, what are you interested in?
Yeah.
Do you like history?
Yeah.
You can read, the way the Bible is laid out, it's very hard to follow the history of the Jews because they're all over the place. Ezra's way over here and the kings are way over there. And if you say like history, do it chronologically. You go online, find a chronological list,
Right.
and read
Yeah.
the Bible that way. And then you can lock the history into your head,
Yeah.
if that's your thing.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the Hebrew Bible is actually in order.
It's-
The actual Hebrew Bible.
Yeah. It's ordered differently from ours.
Yeah.
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 From the Protestant.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
how but yeah, it's all over the
It is.
place for somebody who's trying to wrap their head around the history.
Yeah.
So there's just different ways to look at the Bible, and just find something that appeals to you. One of the things I said, well, how about if we pick a person in the Bible, just a person, preferably a person who doesn't make a big presence at the beginning. And so I picked a fellow from Acts, and his name was Eutychus. Okay? A lot of people don't know about poor old Eutychus, but he's one of my favorites.
He was one of your first. We always remember our first love, right?
Exactly. So I had them read the story of Eutychus, and basically Paul was visiting, and he had to go to another town the next day, and he got there early in the morning on Sunday, and they were going to have break bread, meaning communion, and he talked and talked and talked and talked all day. It was hot. The candles were hot, but smoky, and this young man is sitting in the upstairs window, and the preacher just drones on and on and on. And the
Well,
poor
I hate it
kid-
when that happens,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my
We've
God.
all
don't
been
do
there, right? We all know what that's like.
We don't do that here.
So anyway, he fell asleep and fell out the window and died.
Yeah.
And Paul runs down the stairs and through the power of Christ, resurrects him.
Yeah.
And he went home, but everybody went upstairs and had dinner. Here's a guy, it's like such a great story. How many people have fallen asleep during a boring sermon? You know what I mean? Come on. We can deal with this guy. We understand him. He's like us. And he's a young man. We don't know really how old he was, but he was there. He was in church on Sunday, He's doing the right thing. And he died for it. So, anyway, and, it's stuff like that gets people engaged. None in the class had ever heard of Eutychus. And so it was fun for them to read it and see this guy. And, he's just like me. So all of a sudden, that's just one little place where you can pull something out of the Bible that you can really relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you also see the resurrection power of Christ in that story.
Exactly. So you're learning some Bible stuff too.
Yeah.
And
You're so sneaky.
And I think that's so important, Barb, because it's like you mentioned history too. And one of the things I love is if I'm looking into something, especially in the Old Testament, I can't help myself. I end up like doing searches and figuring out what's going on in the world at that time. What's happening in this part and this part, and what's the culture of the day, and
Yeah.
and it lends so much context, and it makes it fun, but it also makes it, like you were talking about, relatable. Whether it's history or to the individuals, it's so often, and for years I was like this. I think a lot of people get caught up in it. We know this to be true, but they're also larger than life characters in a far off story from way long ago, and so there's we put them on this different plane, and separate them from being just real people, and they were super important people, and they were people that God chose for specific reasons for very important jobs, and they were huge. They were larger than, but they were also real people.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, Oh, go ahead.
So 18 years ago, did the Bible intimidate you?
Oh, yes. I tried to read the Bible a lot when I was younger. I mean, I started out in church, but I never quite got it.
So younger being a kid.
Yeah. And, I would read Genesis, and it's like, oh, come on, this doesn't even make sense, Yeah, how do people live that long? I mean, I had all sorts of weird questions and stuff. And so I never really connected with it. But once I started to look for God, there was a reasons that I went looking for God way old in my age.
Way old.
I was like 50, and I started looking again, realizing that God was missing out of my life. So I started to go to church, and I started to read the Bible, and I still didn't really get it.
Now, when you started to read the Bible, was that with whatever the preacher was preaching on, or was it like starting at Genesis and trying to read through?
I think I did start in Genesis, but that got real old fast. Again, I couldn't get the history wrapped around my head. It didn't make sense because it's all over the place. But when I got saved, the pastor that I had told me, Barb, start with John in the Bible. You're a recently saved person. John will have some real meaning for you. Well, I got home from church that day, and I started to read John, and I absolutely just couldn't put it down. And I was so hungry at this point. That opened the doors for me, and all of a sudden, I just couldn't get enough. And that very first year, I think I read the Bible through 4 times. I just couldn't get enough.
Wow.
And I understood it. It started to come together for me, and I thought, it's true that the Bible is discerned when the Holy Spirit comes in. And I think in my experience, it's absolutely true.
Yes.
Yes. And so I make a point to read the Bible at least once through every year.
And that's interesting because, through the years, we want to, it's like a novel. You want to be able to read it, understand it, and put it down and say, I'm good. But the Bible is not a novel, although it has novel-like places. You just read through and read through and read through because you see God's hand moving in different ways at different times, even though you're reading the same scripture. And it's just really fascinating. I mean, I can't open the Bible anymore without finding God speaking to me. And so that happens as you cultivate that relationship with God through the Word.
So one of the things after I gave him I said, we're going to start with day 1, and we're going to learn the New Testament today. And they're all, oh, no way. Anyway, I had borrowed this idea from a guy who calls himself the Jack of all ministries. And he learned this technique when he went looking for his first job as a preacher. And the guy interviewing him was an old pastor, and he said, do you even know the books of the New Testament? And he said, no. He said, well, I'm going to teach you in 5 minutes or less. And the guy, So he had this fancy computer thing. I'm not a computer tech geek at all. So I did an old-fashioned felt board with pictures.
Very tactile. I like that.
Yeah. So it was basically a home layout with 9 rooms in it, and then a front porch with 4 pillars holding up the porch. And so we started there, and I said, I'm going to tell you a story. So I started the story, and I said, this is my house, and there's 4 pillars that hold up the front porch: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I said, so those are the 4 Gospels, and they're the foundation of the front porch here to hold up the house. And then I kept going, and I said, so now we're going to go into the house, and we're going to go right through the vestibule. And why are we going? Because that's where the action is. That's Acts.
Oh.
And then we hear a lot of noise in the next room, so we walk in, and there's all kinds of people roaming around. Romans. And we just kind of went like that. And if you want, I'll go right through it if you want.
Yeah, keep
fast
going.
and simple. So we go to this corner room, and of course, there's nothing in the room, but there's corners. And how many sides to a corner?
4.
2.
2.
Oh, 2, sorry.
First and
Angle.
Second Corinthians.
Yeah.
So then we're going to go to the girls' room, and we walk in the door, and the place is just full of popcorn. There's popcorn on the floor, on the bed, everywhere. And why is that? Because girls eat popcorn. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians.
I learned that George eats pork chops.
I actually learned that Gentiles eat pork.
Is that right? Very good. Very good. So we leave the girls' room and we're all thirsty. So we head to the dining room and there's 5 glasses of iced tea sitting on the table. There's 2 tall ones, 2 medium ones, and one that's all by itself.
Oh, you just killing
So
me.
this is 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, and Titus. But there's something missing. And I walk into the kitchen and I get 5 lemons for my tea. Philemon. 5 lemons, Philemon. And I see this guy in the corner standing over the stove, and I know he's the chef because he brews the tea. He brews.
Jeez.
And on the other side is this guy dressed in a tuxedo who looks just like James Bond. James. So then we go to the next room, and this is the twins' room. And the twins are really into Peter Pan. We walk in there, and they're all decked out in Peter Pan clothes and everything, and they're fighting like Peter Pan. So this is 1st and 2nd Peter. Well, the tea has worked its way through our systems, and we need to go to the next room. So we walk into the bathroom, and there's 3 Johns. And if you've ever been in a bathroom like that, there's always some weirdo in the 3rd booth, the 3rd one, singing something. And what's he singing? Hey, Jude.
That was me. Yep.
So finally, we're all set, and we walk in to the family TV room with this giant screen on the wall where we're all going to have a revelation. And so I repeated that 3 times, and I said, "Okay, the 4th time you're gonna tell me my story." And the whole class started talking, and we closed it all up. I said, "Okay, can you tell me what the books of the New Testament are?" And they worked it through. And then we let it alone. And at the end of class, I asked him again, "Does anybody remember the books of the New Testament?" And they did. So this
That is
type of
excellent.
thing worked.
Sure.
That's good.
That's really cool.
And
So,
fun.
it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all through, as we learn the Old Testament, I figured I would do that second because it's harder.
You need a bigger
little
house.
longer.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. And I gave them like little sentences to remember, God's eternal love never dies. So that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Well, that didn't really go over real well. I had cool pictures and little things to perk their brains, and I could tell they were having trouble with it. So I went home and I came up with some mnemonics for them. This class seemed to learn best with pictures. So I went home and I started going through the books of the Old Testament, and then I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. So I had pictures. So I showed them an apple, and everybody knew Genesis, right? And I showed a guy levitating somebody, right? Leviticus.
Levitate.
There was a can of Mountain Dew for Deuteronomy, and like that. People that are hard to remember, like Habakkuk. I had the yucky guy, for poison. He go head back. And this way they would remember.
Sure.
And so I gave them little pictures so they could. And then we tried to do using the pictures. We went through the Old Testament, and it worked.
That's so good.
And so it was fun, and they had fun, and of course, their self-esteem. I could see their self-esteem rising because they're learning this stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we would just review that every week just to keep it fresh. And then I thought, well, I need to fill this in with something else. So I decided to give them some I picked 5 things out of the Bible highlights, just to get your, appetite whetted. So we talked about the 10 Commandments and why they're there and what they do and what they mean. And people were surprised when I said, well, the first 4 is how you live in peace with God. Mm-hmm. And the other 6 is how you live in peace with man. Mm-hmm. And people, they thought that was kind of a neat thing. So we went through that, and then we talked about the plagues of Egypt and how God attacked every god in Egypt and showed that he was God and they aren't.
Yeah.
And we went through that, and I talked about the Sermon on the Mount, and just a picture of the Sermon on the Mount, especially the Beatitudes, tells you how we live down here, and the flip of that is how we live in heaven. And that's what Sermon on the Mount is all about. That this is what you do here, but this is how we do it in heaven, and this is what you need to try to do so you can have heaven now, right?
Yeah.
You can be living
Kingdom
eternity
come.
now.
Yeah.
And so, and people thought that was kind of intriguing too. So hopefully somebody will want to read that. And then I walked them through the Roman road, which is I know people are always nervous about telling people about their faith or how to bring it up. So I walked them through the Roman road, and the Roman road, you just start at like Romans 3:10, I think it is, and you just walk yourself through the Bible, and for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. Confess Him, and you will be saved. And I walked them through that. I said, so if that ever comes up, it actually happened to me once. I was at a business, and we were talking about religious stuff, and this gal, she said to me, she says, well, how do you get saved? And of course, I choked up and didn't know what to do. But I thought, that'd be valuable to have taken her through the Roman road right then.
Oh, absolutely.
But I was so stunned that somebody actually asked, just like from Philippians. It's like, I choked. But people need to know these things, right?
Yeah, and that's good to know.
Yeah.
I mean, we aren't going to have answers when we're first asked things. So then you have to figure out how you'll do it differently.
Well, the idea was to try to get people interested in some of the things in the Bible that are really important.
Yes.
And if I could spark something, I thought, this would be. So then we started talking about, Pastor always wants you to memorize verses. Then people dread that. So we went through some techniques to learn Bible verses. And there's a whole bunch of different ways. I always learned them by making up a song. Right?
Oh, yes. Music and lyrics,
and that didn't work for a lot of people. There were two in the class that they thought the songs were cool. But, no. That didn't work. So I took a scripture and I put it on the board, and I said, okay, so let's read this together. I think it was John 3:15. And so we put it on the board, and we started to read it. And then I took away a word, and we read it again. And I took away a word, and we read it again.
That's good with kids, too, to do that. Yep.
And by the time we got to the end, I said, okay, let's all say the verse together. And they were able to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I said, so that's a technique. Hook them on your fridge, put them on your mirror in your bedroom, whatever. And you can learn that way.
I've found, Barb, that for me, that's been like a serious weakness for me is memorizing Bible verses, and still is. It still is. I can't. Jeremy's fantastic with this. We'll be talking about a situation. I'll be like, well, in Numbers, and he'll quote me chapter, and I can't. I struggle so much. Reteaching is a huge one for a lot of people, and that for me has been big too. Because I've got to learn it, then understand the context, and understand everything around it, and then teach it to somebody else. And I've talked to people about like starting a small group, and it's intimidating because they say, well, I'm not a Bible scholar. And I'm like, brother, neither am I. And so I can't remember chapter and verse, and I always encourage them, like, well, actually, if you're teaching other people, that's going to be your best learning mechanism.
Yeah.
That is so powerful.
It really is.
Because you're learning it and committing it. And really hiding that in your heart because you need to know it to teach it to others. And that one was huge for me because every other mechanism, the songs never worked. various devices never worked. The last one, taking words out, never worked. I can't. But teaching to somebody else,
That's another way to
yeah,
do it.
That's what it
Good
is
one.
for me too.
That's the whole thing. Everybody learns differently.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you need some stuff that's tactile. You need
Yeah.
stuff that's memory. You need
Yeah.
singing. You need,
Some people it's
know,
writing.
there's
right?
different-
They're
You
very
can write it
exactly.
down.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody's got a box that can be ticked. You just have to
But the
figure
biggest,
What
I
that
think the
box
biggest
is.
thing is you took the stress off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not, I know with me, I might try to learn something 1, 2, and 3, and I won't learn it, but I might get it on the 5th. And now I don't stress as much about it. I know it's not, you think I stress about it, everything, Jordan. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean,
No, but just knowing that maybe I'm not going to get it today, but I'll get it tomorrow or the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Stress keeps people out of their Bibles.
Yeah.
They're just so daunted when they see
Yeah.
that big fat
When
book
the Bible
and they
would
don't know
take
what
the
to
stress
do.
out of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's just so much good. There's so many good things in the Bible that I tell people. I said, pick something in the Bible you like. If you want to read Revelation first, all right, well, go. That's pretty
Go
tough.
for it.
But read that, and then eventually, you're going to end up reading it all anyway because it starts to really draw you in.
Sure.
yeah.
And we have the Bible because God wants us to know who He is.
Yeah.
And He's
absolutely.
there all the way through, and so is Jesus, right from the very beginning, all the way to the end. We read about Jesus, right?
Yes.
They don't mention His name, but we know who He is.
Yes.
And if you don't understand the old, you're not going to get the new. You've got to
You
have
won't get
both.
the fullness of
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
Yep.
Because the new is the answer to the old.
right.
And so, just that idea of just helping people not be so freaked out. And there's so many different ways to read the Bible, to look at the Bible. One of the easy ones that I taught them was there's an outfit called the Navigators.
Yep.
I mean, their whole thing is to get people in the Bible and understand God and evangelize and all this other. Well, they have something called the 5 by 5 by 5 plan. And it's 5 minutes a day, for 5 minutes a day, 5 verses, and digging 5 ways to dig deeper. Who, what, why, when, where. Right? So you pick something and you read it, and then you try to put it in your own language, right? Rewrite it for yourself, and then ask what, when, why, when, where, that kind of stuff, and think about it, right?
Yeah.
And then go back to it and do that like through a whole book, eventually, and then go back and see what God taught you, in your own words. You're writing your own Bible basically, because it's going to be words that you can connect to, right? That you understand when you interpret, because everybody interprets the Bible differently, right?
From our own context. yeah.
Exactly. So it speaks to us in a different ways on different times.
At different times, yeah.
And so the idea was to get people for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, 5 times a week, to go in there and do this and just try it. Right? Everybody's got 5 minutes they can spare for God, right? So that was another way to teach them. And so I just tried to give them a lot of different ideas.
Right.
One of my favorite things to do is I love Bible name places and people names from the Bible. And you go into a concordance, like old Eutychus there. Eutychus's name means fortunate. Well, I would say that's true, right? I mean, you almost know what's going to happen just because of the name. You think of like in the Old Testament, remember Achan? God said, we're going to take Jericho and nobody take anything. All the stuff is mine,
Yeah.
right? It's all going in the temple.
Yeah.
But old Achan, he got greedy. And there's song about Achan with a slab of
everyone
gold.
paid for it too.
Yeah. And so, Achan stole 3 things and he hid them in his tent. And of course, God saw it, right? And they lost the battle at Ai.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they lost because of this evil thing that was going on that no one else knew, but God knew. So they tested everybody and realized that Achan was the guy. He stole stuff that was God's. And, Achan paid a terrible price, not just him,
But his family.
but his family, all of his animals, his goods, his everything. they were all
Swallowed up,
killed.
right?
Yeah, I think in this case the ground opened up and ate them, right? So like 3,000 people, right? And and Achan, of course, his name means trouble.
And he got in trouble.
So you just know that there's going to be a connection here because of his name, and I find that fascinating.
Oh, it is.
And I love that.
Yeah.
So and that's just another way
Another
to
layer.
get somebody in
Sure.
to just take a dip, see what it's all about.
Dip
Thank
into
you,
the
Barb.
water.
Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, how you saw a need, your enthusiasm. You tell your story, and then you adapt to your class. So, anyway, that's why I was so excited to have this podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So I think we'll wrap it up with that. And we come to you from the Gaylord Methodist Church. We're located in Gaylord on 215 South Court Street. We have 2 services on Sunday. We have a 9 a.m. traditional and a 10:45 contemporary. We also have every second and fourth Wednesday more of a
Encountering God, yeah.
Encountering God discussion type service at 7:15 p.m. So we'd love to have you join us in person. If you can't join us in person, just you can also see us on Facebook or YouTube. And if you have any questions or any comments, just let us know, and feel free to share this if it gets you excited as we were to have this podcast.
Even
today.
if it doesn't, share it anyways.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.